The moon landing conspiracy theory, also known as moon landing hoax or Apollo hoax, is the belief that men did not land on the moon in 1969, 1972 during the Apollo program and that NASA faked the evidence. Some conspiracy theorists believe the Skylab space station is also a hoax. This belief is considered by the scientific community and historians to be irrational. But on the internet, the debate can occur since it is easy for anyone to publish their ideas. There are subcultures within the USA and cultures around the world that believe that the moon landings were faked. This view is claimed to have been taught in Cuban schools and wherever else Cuban teachers are sent, Nicaragua, Angola. It is also shared by the Taliban and by the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. On April 12, 1961, the USSR sent the first man into space in Vostok 1, Yuri Gagarin. 6 weeks later, U.S. President John Kennedy promised a manned moon landing by 1969 to win the battle of systems and impress the world with technical superiority. Finally, if we are to win the battle that is now going on around the world between freedom and tyranny, the dramatic achievements in space which occurred in recent weeks should have made clear to us all, as did the Sputnik in 1957, the impact of this adventure on the minds of men everywhere, who are attempting to make a determination of which road they should take. Moon conspiracy theorists say that NASA had too many technical problems to meet the 8-year deadline for going to the moon. But the USA could not afford to appear to lose the race to the moon, the Soviet Union, and so the moon landings were faked. In 2004, President George Bush gave not 8 but 16 years for a manned return to the moon, even though the technologies for it should have already been developed 40 years earlier. In 2010, President Barack Obama cancelled this plan, which seemed to the moon conspiracy theorists to be an admission that the USA still does not have the technology to go to the moon. Doubts about the authenticity of the Apollo moon landings appeared first in December 1968 when Apollo 8 was launched. The almost perfectly executed Odyssey of Apollo 11 amazed many around the world, and some people doubted it was real. The first book on the subject, Did Man Land on the Moon?, was issued in Texas by the mathematician James J. Cranny in 1970. This is 30-year-old stuff. I don't understand why we should spend the time to prove to people that we went to the moon. In fact of matters, we did go to the moon. Dr. David Williams, NASA archivist at Goddard Space Flight Center, and Apollo 11 flight director Eugene F. Kranz acknowledged that some of the Apollo 11 tapes are missing. When the recordings were sent back to Earth to be shown on TV, they were converted to a different format which was lower quality. Now the lower quality tapes are available, but the original high quality videos received in Australia are missing. Some pictures of the original high quality image are still available, and videos have been released from other missions too, like the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments package. Some people at NASA are looking for the tapes to help them plan for future missions. They believe the Apollo 11 tapes were sent for storage at the U.S. National Archives in 1970, but by 1984 all the Apollo 11 tapes had been returned to the Goddard Space Flight Center. The tapes may have been stored rather than reused, and efforts to determine where they were stored are ongoing. Goddard was storing 35,000 new tapes per year in 1967, even before the lunar landings. On November 1, 2006, Cosmos magazine reported that 100 data tapes recorded in Australia during the Apollo 11 mission had been found in the basement of the Curtin University of Technology in Perth, Australia. One of the old tapes was sent to NASA for analysis. On July 16, 2009, NASA said that it must have erased the original Apollo 11 moon footage years ago so that it could reuse the tape. On December 22, 2009, NASA issued a final report on the tapes. Senior engineer Dick Nafzger concluded that approximately 45 tapes of Apollo 11 video were erased and reused. For the 40th anniversary of the Apollo moon landing, Lowry Digital of Burbank, California restored the low-quality videos. Some pieces of the restored footage are available on the NASA website. Bart Sabirel, a moon landing conspiracy theorist, says that the Soviet Union had much more time in space than the United States before the Apollo program. The Soviet Union put the first satellite in orbit in October 1957, named Sputnik 1. They also put the first animal in space in Sputnik 2, and were the first country to safely bring back an animal from space in Sputnik 5. Yuri Gagarin was the first man to orbit the Earth in Vostok 1, who was also from the Soviet Union. Sabirel believes that since the Soviet Union was so far ahead of the United States in the moon race, the United States had to fake the landings to win. On January 27, 1967, Apollo 1 caught fire and killed 3 astronauts. 2 years later, NASA said that the problems which caused the fire were fixed. Bart Sabirel believes that the problems could not be fixed, so NASA decided to fake the landings to win the moon race. NASA says that the Soviet Union's achievements were not as impressive as the United States. Before Apollo 7, the USSR made 9 space flights, while the US had made 16. Between 1961 and 1967, the US had 7 more space flights than the USSR, and 600 more hours in space. Apollo 7 launched in October 1968, 21 months after the Apollo 1 fire, with an astronaut on board. By Apollo 11, the United States lead was even bigger. Both the United States and the USSR had many problems during the moon race. The USSR had the first in-flight death in 1967, only 3 months after the Apollo 1 fire. According to NASA, most of the accomplishments first made by the USSR were also made by the US within a year. By 1965, the US started to beat the USSR to a few important steps. The USSR never developed a rocket which could land on the moon, and they never tested landing on the moon with an astronaut on board.